Thank you, Bishoy, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming, inviting me to come. As I mentioned on Friday, this was a good learning experience for me. I learned a lot from you, your questions, your comments, and it was a sincere blessing and privilege to be here with you. This afternoon will be the conclusion of our series. Again, I'm going to echo what Joy just mentioned. We began on Friday night with the search for truth. Does truth exist? Is it absolute? Is it relative? What are the characteristics of truth? How to answer objections to truth. I think this was the interactive exercise that we all benefited from. And followed by the question, does God exist? Can we prove that God exists? And what are the arguments that point towards the existence of God? Again, from a philosophical, reasonable, logical perspective, rational perspective. And we had several questions on the problem of evil and suffering and so on and so forth. We'll conclude now that we have discussed truth, existence of God. Now the question remains, which God? And today we will discuss the case for Christianity, or why Jesus, or the distinctiveness of Christ amongst all the other religious leaders in the world. Okay? So basically this is going to be focused on what makes Christianity so special. What makes Christianity so special? Before we begin, I want to ask you this question. And please raise your hand and give me your comments and responses. If I were to, let's say you're meeting in college with someone who believes in God, yeah, but he asks you this question: Why are you a Christian? What would you say? Or why should I be a Christian? What would you say? You guys. Come on, guys. You gotta speak up so we all hear you.
Based on what we talked about, that there has to be a truth, it's exclusive. That means that there is a God, so there is a religion that teaches about the true God, and to find out which one that is, and to investigate all of them, to find out Christianity is.
Very good. That's a logical approach to answering this question. Very good. Anybody else? Excellent, Mark. Anybody else? Good, okay. That's it? Okay. Yes, sir. Why are you Christian now? I don't care how you became Christian. So let me ask you this. Good question, good answer. Let me ask you this. If I am an atheist, and you are roommating with me, and I am a seeker, you are a seeker, and I'm exploring different religions, and you are a Christian, what would be your answer if I were to ask you, should I be a Christian? What would you say? Why? That's my point. Why? Anybody? Why? Yes, sir.
Part of the reason for me is that the idea of the supernatural being coming in the flesh appears in all the other religions, but is best distilled in the story in Jesus Christ.
Okay. So this is a comparison between other religions, and then you came up with the conclusion of Jesus Christ's message makes most sense. Okay.
Yes.
Who else? And one last one. We'll go on. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Since you said speaker, so we're establishing
In a God, but he wants to know that what Jesus is so special.
So Christianity is the only story where it tells the relationship between God, where it takes humanity from the very beginning upon establishing man into their image, and then how men fall, and then how God starts to reestablish humanity or reestablish providence with humanity, and eventually comes here and dies on the cross for us. Which you don't find that story in any other religion, that they start at some point where there is a gap. You don't see that from the very beginning.
Excellent. Well said. Very well said. That's a good, an argument that can hold some water. And yes, sir. One last. Go ahead. Last point. Good answers. Good answer.
I really think that what makes me a Christian.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, I think the speakers are somewhere close to you. Sir, but you don't want to use the Bible. That's why I'm a Christian, because he doesn't. What I mean to say is you cannot presuppose the validity of the scriptures to prove the validity of the scriptures. That's presuppositionalism. That's the field, presuppositionalism. You can't do that. But what you can say, what you just said, that there were fulfilled prophecies in this book, or there were prophecies in this book that were fulfilled in the other book. Okay, I was hoping to, okay, there you go, so I can come between you guys. So, I will begin with a video, actually, we'll probably skip the video clip for now. But, are you familiar with this picture? Or not familiar with it, but are you familiar with the concept of this picture? This is a very common belief nowadays, is that, you know, all religions are leading to the same God. You have psychic phenomena, transcendental meditation, Buddhism, New Age, Islam, Christianity. All of them are simply paths up the same mountain, and eventually will reach the same God. It just so happened that those Christians call him Jesus. Muslims call him Allah. Buddhists call him, call it Nirvana, and so on and so forth, okay? But do you know, I intentionally left out Christianity from this picture. Why? Yes, ma'am. Very good. Christianity is a life, not a religion. Very good point. But why is it not in this mountain? It could be a life in this mountain. Yes, ma'am. Perfect. That's the question and answer I was looking for. Perfect answer. Christianity is actually the opposite way of what this picture depicts. All these religions is man trying to reach out for God, where Christianity, what sets Christianity separate or distinct or different, is that God is reaching out to man. And that is one of the differences that we ought to take note of. And I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure you have. You have. Please say yes. Good. Okay. Even if you haven't. So, coexist. This is kind of the slogan of the 20th century or 21st century. We gotta coexist and, you know, hold hands and get, you know, and sing kumbaya and all these things together. That's what, you know, society is preaching, you know, coexist all together. But what's the problem with coexist? Of course, we can coexist in love and unity and respect and all that, but I don't think that's what this message proclaims. I'm not saying we should not peaceably coexist. St. Paul said, as long as it depends on you, live what? Peaceably among all men. Yeah, we should live peaceably, but that's not what the underlying message of this coexist. The underlying message is that they're all equally true or valid. Can you say valid? Yes, equally valid or equally true, more so. But the problem with coexist is that they all contradict. The problem with coexist is that they all contradict. So yes, you can have the coexist, but they will contradict. Not only contradict themselves, but it will contradict your own logic, and you cannot live with that. These are the three main worldviews, and I'm not going to get into details, but we have different, all the religions in the world, every single religious system in the world, name it, and it will fit into these three worldviews, three buckets. You have atheism, no God at all. You have theism, God made all. And you have pantheism, God is all. Okay? But we're not going to get into details on this. Let's talk about the uniqueness of Christianity. And what's your name? Yes. Okay. Can I say Samia or Tant Samia? Samia answered the question, the uniqueness of Christianity, life. Christianity gives us new life. New life. Do you guys remember the human condition that I talked about? How many were here for the first time or didn't come? So, okay, some of you. The new condition, the human condition rather, is that I mentioned there are 4 questions that we ought to be able to answer. All religions must answer. The 4 questions. What's the what? What's the problem? The cause of the problem? The solution? And the way to the solution. These are the 4 questions. 4 questions every philosopher, thinker, scholar, you name it, Plato, Aristotle, Freud, Buddha, every single religious leader had to answer these 4 questions. These are called the human, or the problem with the human condition. So we said that the problem was not sin, the problem was death. The cause of the problem is sin. The solution to the problem is life. And the way to the solution is Christ, a life-giving being. How can I have life? I must be plugged into a life-giving being. So Christ came not to give us, or Christianity, what sets Christianity distinct or separate, it is not about some ethical, moral code of conduct. Do this and don't do that. That's more like Eastern mysticism or Buddhism, more so. But Christianity is all about a new life. to solve the human condition problem, which is death. Okay? A new life. Dr. Ravi Zacharias said a very beautiful quote. He said, Christianity is about becoming a self that the self itself could not produce. Christianity is about becoming a self that the self itself could not produce. One more reason, or one more, I guess, reason, to separate Christianity or point to the uniqueness of Christianity amongst all the other religions. It is that it's based on the teacher. It's based on the teacher. All religions in the world are based on the teachings of the teacher, whereas Christianity is based on the teacher, not the teachings. You take Muhammad out of Islam. Do you think Islam will continue? Yes, it's based on Allah, not Muhammad. Okay, although he may be deified in certain places, but it's not based on him, it's based on his message. You take Buddha out of Buddhism, do you think Buddhism will continue? Yes, because he pointed to the way. You take Confucius out of Confucianism, do you think it will continue? Yes. Now, you take Christ out of Christianity, it's no longer Christianity. Christianity is based on the teacher, not the teachings. So Christ came not to teach us Christianity. Christ is Christianity. Christ came not to teach us Christianity. Christ is Christianity. Yes, sir. That's one of the other differences, and that actually I'm going to point out too. How? Right. But you're assuming, okay, my point here is that Christ as a religious leader came and said, this religion I am establishing is based on me. That's one logical point. The other kind of logical outworking of this, why would it be based on you? It's because you are God. So they don't contradict. The reason why Christianity is built on him, it's because he is God. So what you're saying is a result of what I just said. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you, Abuna. Okay. Number 3. Now pay attention to this one because this is very interesting. Christianity is falsifiable. What do I mean by falsifiable? You can prove it false. You can prove it false. It is falsifiable. Look at this. I'm sorry, I keep moving around. After a public ministry, Christ was killed publicly. Christ rose from a public tomb publicly. Christ publicly showed himself to the public. The public told everyone what they saw. Can anyone argue with that? No, this is historical evidence, historically proven facts. After a public ministry, Christ was killed publicly. And if you want to read more about this, read the historian Jew, who's not a Christian, by the name of Josephus. Okay? Flavius Josephus, he wrote the Antiquities of the Jews. And he has extensive historical account on the life of Jesus, that man whose name is Jesus. Again, he wasn't a Christian, he was a Jew. Read the historical account and you'll come to this public. Everything's public. Public tomb, public showing, public everything. Now, how did other religions come about? Let's look at the other picture. Other religions, private dream about God, or private angelic encounter about God, or private idea about God, or one person told everyone what they saw. Think about it. Just think logically. So there is the public, and there's the private. Which one is falsifiable? Which one can you prove false? The public. Which one you cannot falsify? The private. Do you get it? Nobody saw it. And by the way, there's a, I don't want to get into the, there's a miracle in the scriptures about Christ healing the paralytic. When, remember when he told the paralytic, your sins are forgiven? And everybody said, oh, what are you talking about? Your sins are forgiven. You could say whatever you want. Why is that? Because it's what? Not falsifiable. Yes, it's not falsifiable. I can say, hey, your sins are forgiven. Can you prove it? Can I prove it? No. But so Christ can prove the greater miracle, your sins are forgiven. He demonstrated the lesser miracle that is falsifiable, which is get up and walk. Do you get it now? To prove that which is falsifiable, he demonstrated that which is infalsifiable, which is get up and walk. If I can tell you as a lame person to get up and walk, and you can prove it false, then by default, your sins are forgiven is automatically proven. Do you get it? All right. The uniqueness of Christ. The uniqueness of Christ. He's alive today. He is alive. Who can claim from all their religions, who can claim to be alive today? The tomb of Buddha, we know where it is in the, I think, Himalayas mountains. The tomb of Muhammad, we know where it is. The tomb of all the, we know where the tombs are. But then these people have died. Yes. This slide? Yes. Right, but it's not so much that he came into the flesh that was private. What's the reason for which he came? To die and then to resurrect. This death was what? A public death. This was not just a conspiracy thing that happened behind closed doors. This was, exactly, it's historical. It's a public death, and Christ intentionally died on the way he died so that he can die publicly. Because you need to see that. And he rose privately because you need to believe that. He died publicly so that you can see that event. He rose privately so that you can believe that event. But then even the resurrection, he appeared to more than what? How many? 500. So even the resurrection was public. Okay. You're good? Okay. You're welcome. He's alive today. The empty tomb. I would like you to go and look up this phrase. The empty tomb. Just go to Google and type the empty tomb. You'll see countless research on how did the tomb get empty. Do you know at the time the Romans were very strong. They were the strongest civilization, the strongest country in the world at the time. If they wanted to get something done, believe me, they'd get it done. The Romans were mighty and strong. And they hated, by the way, Christianity. And it was in their special interest to get rid of Christianity altogether. And there was only one thing they could have done to get rid of Christianity. What is it? How? How? Find the body. Find the body. That's all they needed to do. I mean, are you telling me you, Romans, with all your might and power, you couldn't do that simple thing? Find the body. Not only that, it was guarded by 3 mighty soldiers. And at the time, these soldiers were guarding the tomb with their lives. I mean, this was not a joke. They're not going to get written up. No, this is their life. So find the body, Christianity crumbles. That's it. Also, let me tell you something else. Jesus was very bold in saying, I am going to rise from the dead physically. Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. You could have said, I mean, come on, make it a little easier for us. Why don't you just say, I'm going to rise from the dead spiritually? Nobody could have proved that. But he was intentionally saying, I'm going to rise physically because he is going to rise physically. So he is alive today. Someone said, what? Samuel. Excellent point that Samuel said earlier, that he's a person. In no other religion will you find that magnificent, wonderful idea or concept that God who created me is not just working. Better be. Thank you. God, our Christ is a person. Is not just an idea. He is a person. Okay. He's not a force. He's not a He's not a force. He's not energy. He's not force. God is what? A force. We have to be with you. You know what? Forgive the interruption. So he's a force. See now, may the force be with you. He's a person. Tell me of another faith or another religion where God is an actual person with whom, Samuel, you can have a what? A relationship. Tell me one. Tell me of a religion whose God comes in you so that you can ultimately be in him. Can you fathom the significance of that? God comes in you so that you can be in him. And if you read the epistles to the Ephesians, the word in him was listed about 35 times. In him, that's the whole point. Because in him is in what? In Christ. In him, remember the human condition. In him is in what? Life. And that's what I need as a human being. Because that's the problem that we all tried to solve and we couldn't find a solution. Well, here is life. I gotta be plugged into him so that I can be a living person. And we also said, I think we mentioned that yesterday, that Christ wills. When you say God willing, Inshallah, when you say God willing, you're implying that your God has a what? Mind to will. And if he has a mind, you're also implying that he is a person. A person. How can this microphone wills anything? No, it's a material object. God is a person who has a mind, and this mind has a will. فَلَمَّا تقول إن شاء الله, you're implying that you believe in a God who is a person. He is also God in the flesh. He took flesh. And this kind of ties back to the second point. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have one question. Do you have any records of him besides the scripture? This proof resurrection, Christianity.
Very good. Absolutely.
He said that he was the Savior.
Abundance, not just some, abundance. And let me give you some. Go to the internet and type Gary Habermas. Gary Habermas. I think we just talked about that. And you'll find countless. Gary Habermas. Habermas. Gary Habermas. Very briefly to answer your question, he was an atheist, and his point of contention was that there's no way Christ arose from the dead. There's no way. It just doesn't happen. But because he was honest with himself, he said, you know what? I mean, what's at stake is very high. I'm gonna go on a mission to see if he really rose from the dead or not. And then he actually, he went on a research for years and years, and he spent 15 years of his life, historical, archaeological, you name it, studying the resurrection of Christ from an atheistic perspective. And then he wrote countless books on the evidence for the resurrection, and then he became a believer. So read his resources, they will answer your question. He took flesh. Okay, I'm gonna speed up a little. He took flesh. He claimed deity. Again, per what Samuel's question, he's the only one who came and said, "I am God." Subtly, but he said it multiple times. He's the only one that claimed deity. No one else did. He's the only one who said, "I am the way." Everyone else came to say, "I will point to the way. I will show you the way." Christ is the only one that came and said, "That way is actually me. I am the way." One of the church fathers said, Christ is not only our destination. Christ is our inn, I-N-N, our inn, in which we rest every night to reach our destination. That's what I mean by He's the way. He's the hotel room that we lodge in every night that leads us to the destination. Christ is not just somewhere out there. No, Christ is going to take me to Himself. Okay? He died for my sake. Did any other leader of any religion did that? As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. Yes, sir.
I have a question on this stuff. How does this stuff relate to the fact that we have divine art and have? So, when God came and died, He died because of the miracles, whatever He was doing, and the Jews wanted Him to be crucified. And how does that relate to the sin of Adam and Eve? Yes, He died. He died instead of Adam and Eve, but I don't think Adam and Eve were supposed to die that way.
Yes. Okay. This is actually back to the book I was mentioning earlier about on the incarnation with Saint Athanasius. You may actually read this book. And if you read Arabic, it's called Tajassud al-Kalima. Ta'rib al-Qumus Murkus Dawood. And if you want to get the details, that book will explain in depth the answer to your question. Okay? Why did He have to die this way? Or you can read Romans chapter 5.
No, that's not my question. It's not why. How does that relate to the promise of dying instead of Adam and Eve? How does His death relate to that? Because it's not really fulfilling the punishment.
How do you know? What was the punishment?
The punishment was death, but not that way. The death is different in that case. Because
What way would it be satisfying?
Okay, so death for Adam and Eve was eternal. For Christ, it wasn't eternal.
It was what?
No. His death is not eternal.
Uh-huh.
So
His death is not eternal. Okay, that's a good question. His death is eternal. You know why? Because who died? God. Who is God? Eternal. Then His death is eternal. I don't want to get into too much theology so that we don't lose the theme. But who do you think died? The divinity or the humanity? Humanity. But the humanity was united with what? Divinity. You see? Did not separate for a moment or twinkling of an eye. As a matter of fact, you can also read St. Cyril of Alexandria, and he had this very famous quotation. Remember, God God incarnate, the Logos, dying for us as God, man in one. So that implies his death is eternal. Because if his death is not, then he only saved those who died with him. I didn't die with him 2,000 years ago. And as a matter of fact, I recall his death every Sunday. Right? Okay. Good question. He died for my sake. So I was having a conversation with a Muslim friend. And he told me, you know, we're all worshiping the same God. We just call it Allah, you call it Jesus. And I said, no, we're not. No, we're not worshiping the same God. He said, why? I said, well, let me give you an example. I said, your God asks you to send and kill your son for his sake. Whereas my God has sent and killed his son for my sake. Which God you think I would want to worship? And then the conversation ended automatically. Okay? Simple. His God asks him to send and kill his son for his sake. Whereas my God sent and killed his son for my sake. I'm going to worship the loving God. Not only that, but if he asks you to send and kill your son for his sake, that implies he's a weak God that needs you to defend him. My God doesn't need me to defend him. He defends me. That's the God I want to worship. Number 5, he is sinless and pure. Sinless and pure. Tell me one, again, leader of any religion that can claim this. Whom of you, did he say something? What is it? Whom of you, okay. Whom of you can what? Convict me of sin. Man minkum yubakkitni ala khatiyya. Who? No one. Actually, this was said by John, by Paul, by Peter, and by Christ himself. And here are the references. We know Muhammad had more than, 20 wives. And a lot more. You can read Nisa al-Nabi by Aisha Abdul Rahman. And you can see how many, and this was a scholarly book as well. Krishna had relations with the milkmaids, indicating he wasn't pure. Buddha had multiple rebirths, multiple incarnations, which indicates that he wasn't pure. Christ emerges out of all of them as the pure leader. Someone talked about the fulfillment of prophecy. I'm not going to go through all of this, but the fulfillment of prophecy is another point. I will skim through it very quickly. Number 7, miracles. This is not for you to try to read. This is just a kind of reference, but it's on the screen just for reference only. His countless miracles. He made the claim to be God. I can make the claim to be God, but the difference is that he backed it up. He proved it by his countless miracles. Miracles over creation, miracles over demonstrate power over nature, over evil, over demons, over sickness, over a lot of things. Let me read to you what people said about him. A couple of quotations that will strike a chord in your thinking. What people said about him. This was said by Rubel Shelley. He's a president of Rochester College and professor of philosophy and religion. Read with me. He's born in an obscure village. He was the child of a peasant woman. As Christians, we never thought of looking at Christ from this perspective. So it's very interesting and intriguing. He worked in a carpenter shop until he was about 30. Then for 3 years, he helped people whenever he could. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never went to college. He never had a family of his own or owned a house or a home. He never traveled over 200 miles from the place where he was born.
He never did any of the things that usually accompany greatness and had no credentials but himself. While he was still a young man, the tide of public opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through a mockery of a trial, after which he was executed along with 2 thieves. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for the only piece of property he owned. 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years have now come and gone. And today he's the central figure of the human race, the ultimate example of love. It is no exaggeration to say that all the armies that have ever marched, all the navies that have ever sailed, all the kings who have ever reigned, all the congresses that have ever convened, put together, have not affected the life of man upon this earth as the one solitary life. And that's what people thought of Christ. Napoleon said, "I know men, and I can tell you that Jesus Christ is no mere man. Between him and every other person in the world, there's no possible term of comparison. Alexander the Great, Caesar, and I have founded empires, but on what did we rest the creations of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire upon love, and at this hour, millions of men and women would die for him." And so on and so on and so on, but I'll spare you the time and I will just move to that video clip that I want to share with you. And this video clip is an interview that Lee Strobel, I'm sure many of you know who he is. Lee Strobel is a Christian author, an apologist, writer, and journalist, lawyer, private investigator, all of the above, that was an atheist and through genuine seeking became a Christian. He was interviewed with someone. "Can you tell me what's so special about this Jesus of yours?" And let's see what he says.
What is so unique about Jesus Christ? Because my Muslim friend would say, well, Muhammad is equal to Jesus. And why are you convinced in the case for Christ?
Can you hear?
I'm convinced, first of all, because Jesus made a startling claim. He claimed that he's the Son of God. That's clear from history. He made that assertion. Now, anybody can claim that. When I was a reporter, we did a lot of investigative stories about mental hospitals.
Sorry, I'm going to rewind.
I tell you, there's no shortage of people who will tell you they're God, and they're clearly not. But why is it that people around the planet have believed Jesus? The question is, do you have any evidence to back up your claim? And what we have is the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He didn't just say I'm the Son of God, but we have convincing evidence. We have evidence, I taught the 5 E's real quick to summarize the evidence of the resurrection. The execution of Jesus. He was clearly dead when he was taken off the cross. I mean, even the Journal of the American Medical Association did an article analyzing the historical medical data and said clearly he was dead even before the spear was thrust into his side. Secondly, we have the empty tomb. Everybody in the ancient world agreed the tomb of Jesus was empty on that first Easter morning. The question was, how did it get empty? And of course, the religious authorities made up the story that the disciples had somehow stolen the body. Well, they didn't have the means or the motive or the opportunity. So that clearly isn't the answer. But the tomb was clearly empty. Third, we have eyewitnesses. Over 515 eyewitnesses, including skeptics, whose lives were transformed because they encountered the resurrected Jesus in a lot of different circumstances. They touched him, they ate with him, they communicated with him. This is not a legend, not a hallucination, not wishful thinking. This was reality. And then we have early records. And this is so important, I think, when we look at the difference between Islam and Christianity. And I have a dear Muslim friend who comes over to my house and we grill steaks and we talk about this. And, the point I tried to make to him is I said, this is not, Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. We have all these things so far, the execution, the empty tomb, and the eyewitnesses so far. But we also have early records of all of this. And why that's important is, I used to think this idea that Jesus is the Son of God who rose from the dead was a legend that grew up in the many centuries later. But what we have preserved for us is a creed of the early church that summarizes the essence of Christianity. The Apostle Paul reports it in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 and following. This creed says Jesus died. Why? For our sins. He was buried. He was resurrected on the third day. And then it mentions the names of specific eyewitnesses, including skeptics, who encountered him and were willing to die for their conviction that he returned from the dead and proved he's the Son of God. Now, this creed has been dated back by scholars from a wide range of theological belief to as early as 24 to 36 months after the life of Jesus, and the beliefs that make up that creed go right back to the cross itself. So this is like a newsflash from ancient history. This is reliable historical data. Now, I said to my Muslim friend, I said, now, I have this data, not just those E's. I'll give you one more real quick, the emergence of the church. How do you explain the sudden explosion of the Christian church onto the scene in the very same city where Jesus was put to this humiliating, degrading death just a few weeks later? How do you explain that apart from the resurrection? Because we have records of Peter getting up to this group and saying, men of Israel, listen to this Jesus. You remember him. He did miracles in your midst. You know that he did. And then he said, God raised him from the dead, to which we're all witnesses. And what did they say? Did they say, Peter, you're out of your mind. You don't know what you're talking about. No. 3,000 of them said, Peter, we know you're telling the truth. We know these things are true. What do we do? And faith in Jesus Christ, the church was born. 3,000 people that day. How do you explain that if the resurrection isn't true? So I said to my Muslim friend, I said, I've got all this historical data, fresh, right back to the scene. And then I have Muhammad, who over 600 years later says he is told by an angel in a cave that Jesus did not die on the cross. There was no resurrection. You look at, I've read the Quran, Surah 4, verse 157. It says Jesus didn't die on the cross. And also the Quran is very clear. It says God did not have a son. So I say, okay, just from an historical analysis perspective, if I have this really reliable historical data for the resurrection, and then I've got someone 600 years later saying it's not true, where does the evidence most logically point in terms of something that I can put my trust in? So we've had a lot of debates about this kind of thing, and I think it's healthy to engage in these kind of dialogues with people because, I think as Christians, we have an unfair advantage in the marketplace of spiritual ideas. And that unfair advantage, if I can be frank, is the truth is on our side. And so we ought to be able to say, you know what? Peter tells us in 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. We should be prepared, we should be ready to be able to help people understand, not just what we believe as Christians, but why we believe it.
I think it's very well said, and very profound, very passionate, as you can see. And I think this sums it all up, but we're not done. Sorry, we're not done. A couple more minutes. But that's what Lee believes in. After thorough, genuine investigation and research and study. One last thing I want to mention to you is this. Somewhat existential / philosophical. The duality of the world. What do I mean by that? Duality of the world. What I mean by this is that we all love scenes like this, don't we? We do. And we feel joyful and happy and relaxed and all the wonderful things when we see this. But what about that? We cringe and get kind of sick to our stomach and are not thrilled, obviously, to see this, right? We all have moments of laughter and joy and happiness, followed by moments of sadness, tears, and cries. It seems that life gives to you with one hand only to take with the other. That's life, isn't it? I mean, have you ever seen someone that's totally joyful, happy, and you're laughing all the time? I mean, you have moments of sadness. Have you ever seen someone who's sad? Maybe you have, but it shouldn't be that way. But life seems to be given and taken. Given and taken. Dreams are followed by nightmares. Youthfulness and energy are followed by old age and sickness. And that's just life. Why can't we? The question now follows. Why can't we reconcile ourselves with this duality? Why? In other words, why do I always want the first, not the latter? Why do I always want the joy, the laughter, the sunset, the mountains, the ocean view, and all that? And I don't want the tsunamis or the earthquakes or any of that. Why? Wouldn't that indicate that you are not of this world and you have a deep longing for another world in which there is no sadness, there is no crying, there's no tears, there's no anxiety, there's no misery? Wouldn't that be an indicator that you don't belong here? And here is what I would like to share with you. I had a conversation with someone who is a naturalist, atheist naturalist. Most atheists are mostly naturalists. They believe that they're part of this world. They're part of this. They are a particle in this world, a piece of furniture in the house of this world. Basically, this is who they are. And when they die, they will just be consumed back into this world. So I talked to this atheist naturalist and I said, can I ask you a question? Have you ever seen a fish in a fishbowl? He said, yes. He said, have you ever heard or seen a fish that complains of being wet? He said, no. I said, why? He said, because it's meant to live in water. I said, pretend that fish is complaining of being wet. Wouldn't that be the greatest indicator that it was meant to live on dry land? And that's the point. If you're complaining of these things that are taking place in this world, that is an indication that you are meant to live in a different world. Because if you're part of this world and you see tsunamis and volcanoes and earthquakes, it's just the world is just flexing its muscles, or it's yawning or whatever. You shouldn't actually feel anything different. You're part of it. Oh, some people died here and there. Oh, it's okay. They're just going to come back into this world. But you don't. So look at your existence and think existentially and think realistically. That would be the greatest philosophical argument to prove that you are not from here. You are not from here. Okay, I'm going to skip through this and go to, again, my favorite picture that I've been showing you throughout the whole weekend. One final quote from C.S. Lewis in his book, which I encourage for all of you to purchase and read. The book is Mere Christianity. I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish things that people often say about him, Christ. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. This is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. So you cannot be neutral. As a matter of fact, Christ said, you can't be neutral about me. He actually said, if you're not with me, you're against me. He didn't say, fine, don't come with me, just stay in the middle. There's no middle ground. There is no neutrality in Christianity. You're either building with Christ or something else. Lastly, I have something to share with you. It's a story that will, I think, sums it all up. I think it will sum it all up, and will bring it all into a conclusion that I hope will make sense. A man fell into a pit, and then this pit had a serpent, and he wanted to get out of this pit. And let me read to you this story. And it's a very, again, one of the heartfelt stories that I love very much. There was once a man who fell into a deep pit in which there was a serpent. Along comes an optimist and said, things could be worse. A pessimist comes and says, things will get worse. Then comes a Confucianist and says, great wise man, never fall into pits. Walk wisely and you will get yourself out of the pit. A Hindu comes and says, my brother, you think that you are in a pit, but this is the error of your mind. All is Brahman, and this is just an illusion. The pit does not exist. Just say, the pit does not exist 10 times, and all will be well. Peace. A Muslim comes and says, I will help you, my friend. He reaches down and grabs him by the arm and pulls him halfway out. Then he draws his knife and says, you will become a Muslim, right? The man answers and says, no, and back into the pit he goes. A fundamentalist says, you deserve your pit. An evolutionist says, you are a rejected mutant, destined to be removed from the evolutionary cycle. You are going to die in the pit so that you do not produce inferior pit-falling offspring. A psychologist said, your mother and your father are to blame for your being in that pit. But don't worry, believe in yourself and you can get out of that pit. A Buddhist comes and says, you are suffering because you want to get out of the pit. It is your desire that's making you miserable. You must not desire to get out of the pit. Then comes Jesus. He looks with compassion at the man in the pit and leaps between the man and the serpent, which strikes at the Savior. As the venom of the serpent flows into the blood of Jesus, with his last strength, he lifts the man out of the pit. Therein lies the difference between Christianity and all the other religions. This, my friends, is the essence of our faith. I hardly keep a dry eye when I read this story every now and then. But anyways, this is the beauty of our faith that I want for each of you to not take for granted and say, I'm a Christian because I was born a Christian, or I just come to believe in whatever because out of habit. We have a faith that is solid, that is founded upon faith itself, upon God, but also there is evidence. Do not take that faith lightly, but instead live it and share it. Live it in your lives and share it with others so that you can build the kingdom of God. And this concludes our discussions for this weekend. I want to open it for maybe 10 minutes. It's okay. 10 minutes maximum or so of questions, just because I have a flight to catch. Yes, sir. Huh? How do you explain the Trinity to an atheist? I don't think you need to explain the Trinity to an atheist. I think the atheist has a lot more explanations that he or she may want to hear first before the Trinity. How do you, anybody here knows Microsoft Excel well enough? Okay. If I don't know how to write a formula in Excel, how can you explain an if-then statement or a VLOOKUP? You see what I'm saying? So you begin with the basics and then go on. Yes, anybody else? Yes, sir.
I have an Egyptian friend from Egypt who became an atheist. He was Christian and he became an atheist. So basically the question he struggled with, how can an all-knowing God, an all-loving God, a compassionate God, says something in the Old Testament like killing, and then in the New Testament says that you should not kill your enemies. And another part of the question, how can an all-knowing and an all-loving God, he knows the future, knows what's going to happen, he knows that his creation, most of them are not going to be with him, most of them are going to be in hell, suffering for eternity. How can a loving God allow that to happen? Why would he create them in the first place?
Very good. Excellent question. You weren't here yesterday. You was?
talked about the problem of evil a little bit yesterday, but okay. This is a question that I don't think we have time to. This is a whole discussion in and of itself. But let me point you to some books, and I will give you a very brief answer. But I'm afraid that the answer will elicit more questions and so on and so forth. So this could take a very long time. Let me give you some books to read. Okay? If you are really interested. Well, you don't like to read. You don't like to read. You're honest at least. Tough twice. Can I email you some articles? Okay? And then, but for those of you who are interested or would like to research more, there is a book by an author called Paul Copan. Paul Copan, and I know Bishoy has the book, and he actually has it on ebook format or PDF, one or the other. It's actually, it's called Is God a Moral Monster? Is God a Moral Monster? It talks extensively to your questions, and it's a good-sized book. So I find it very difficult to summarize it in a minute or two. But if I would summarize it for you, or I would answer your question, how can an all-loving God send His creation to hell? Really, the issue with the question is that He doesn't send anybody to hell. We send ourselves to hell. Someone said there are only two types of people in this world. Only two types of people in this world. Listen to this. Those who have said to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God will say, "Thy will be done." Those who have all along said to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says, "Thy will be done." In other words, I send myself to hell. God doesn't send anybody. He gives me the freedom to love Him back. But the freedom to love Him implies the freedom to reject Him. If He takes away my freedom to reject, He automatically takes away my freedom to love, which in turn becomes not love. Because love implies freedom. Freedom from the lover unto the beloved. If I love my wife truly, I give her the freedom to love me back. If she has no choice, then I don't love her. And God has a supreme ethic of love. As a matter of fact, one of the attributes of God is what? Compassionate, merciful, wise, and all, right? But when it comes to love, it's not an adjective. It's a noun. Did you think about that? God is not just loving. God is love. Have you ever heard God is compassion? No, God is compassionate. But when it comes to love, it's His essence. So because it's His supreme ethic, He gives you what love entails. And the book talks about this more and more and goes into the Old Testament and New Testament and so on and so forth. But that's kind of the short, hopefully satisfying answer to you. Any other question? Yes, sir. What? Oh, okay. Slavery. You need to understand slavery in the Old Testament is very different than slavery in our modern age. That's just one thing. So you have to understand why and the reason God allowed slavery. And also there is a book written by someone of the name of Sean McDowell. S-E-A-N. He's very famous. Yes, he is American and very famous. Sean McDowell. And he talks again extensively. And forgive me, I don't mean to not give you the answer, but you like to read? Okay, good. Okay. Yes. So if you like to read them, let me give you 3 books then. Okay, Sean McDowell, Being Bold in a Whatever World. Being Bold in a Whatever World. And he talks about slavery. He talks about the just war theory. He talks about a lot of issues from a biblical, philosophical perspective. So you'll find your answer there. In very short answers, slavery then is different than slavery now. Slavery then was actually protective. Slavery now is abusive. And you can get the details. Besides, yes, sir.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. Yeah, sure. So, regarding the point of Christianity, where you said that all the people who are not Christian are against Christianity, how are we supposed to look at those people? And also, another question is, what are the odds if you were born to a family that were not Christian? What are the odds that you would have looked for Christ and become a Christian? And are all people...
These are two questions so far.
Yeah, it's all related to the same point. That they are all related to the same point. That a lot of the people, like more than half of the population in the world, are not Christian. So is it fair that you demand that all of them look for Christ and become Christian, although the factors are very different? You were born in a Christian family, in a solid Christian family, in the church. You had a lot of education about the Bible. Not all the people have the same circumstances. So why do you demand them to, all of them become Christian?
Okay, very good questions. Very good questions. And I appreciate those questions. What's your name? Tony. I appreciate your questions, Tony, because these questions indicate that you have a compassionate, loving heart to ask such a question. So I appreciate this question. But let me answer the first one. How do we look at those people who are not Christians? Because I said those who aren't with Christ are against Christ. By the way, when I say against Christ, I don't mean that they are just, throwing stones at him, but I mean they're not edifying the body of Christ. And by default, if you're not building, you're destroying. But how do you look at these people who haven't had the privilege or the blessing to know the Lord, to know Christ? How do you look at them? Not as enemies, but as what? And I said that, I think, to you earlier, Bishoy, as patience, as our patience. And that's sometimes difficult to do, but it's what Christ asked us to do. I'll answer your other questions in a second, but just the first one is very important. When you see someone who's an atheist and an antagonist and attacking Christianity, and there's no shortage of those people, by the way. They go to the media, and I'm sure you know many, and they curse and all kind of things against Christ. Your instinctive reaction is to do what? To dislike them. I don't say sometimes, but maybe to hate them. Even those who kill and persecute and all. We don't like these people, but that's not what you should do. You should see them as patients and victims of a common enemy. That common enemy is Satan. They are victims of him, just like sometimes I and you become victims in different ways. So if you look at them with that perspective, how you relate to them will change. You have been privileged by a medication, as the church fathers say, the medicine of immortality, which is the Eucharist. You have been privileged by this medicine, and you are called to share it with those who are stricken with sickness. And that's what I would say. The second point you asked, what about those, half of the world are not Christians, what about them? And I think we may have, were you here yesterday? Okay. We did talk about that yesterday. Can someone remind me? Yes, you can give me the reference.
No, I'm okay. I think in response, I think there are two types of people who we can say are non-Christians. You have those who are non-Christians who, I think, as George was describing, are antagonistic against the Christian faith. And I'm not sure if that's the type of people you're referring to. I think you're probably referring to the people who are just of other faiths, who grew up in households that don't practice Christianity, and it's difficult to imagine that they would see Christ, in their journey in life. Completely understood. Right. Right. I completely understand your question. I just want to make a comment. Number one, I can tell you that there are people who, when they are in touch with true Christians, Christians who practice Christianity the way Christ lives. Okay? With 2.14 billion Christians living in this world, approximately a third of the world by name. Imagine if there were 2.14 real Christians. Imagine how many people who actually see Jesus Christ in the lives of a Christian. Don't tell me that there won't be millions and millions and billions of people turning to Christ. Because if we are the evidence of Christ, and we are actually showing who Christ is, the everlasting, the all-loving, fully faithful, I think people will say there is someone behind this. This is not real. And so we can't blame people of other faiths who look at us and they see no difference between us and them. They will say they believe in someone and I believe in someone, and we're all climbing up the same mountain from a different way, finding the same God, even though George has clearly proven to us that that's not the case. So I think it's very important that we don't forget, amongst all of this, the essence of Christianity and living a Christian life as the utmost example and evidence of who Christ is.
Thank you very much, Bishoy. Well said. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So we believe in Christ and we're baptized. Why do we have to come to church? Why do we have?
Yes, excellent question. This is
Because
interesting because I had 7 of the 20 questions that were given to me from you were about the same thing. Why do I have to come to church?
Yeah, a lot of people that I see there.
Okay.
They're
Do you live far away?
From here?
Uh-huh.
No.
Okay.
Glendale. Because I know a lot of people that these just say they're Christian, and they believe, but they don't need to come to church, or they're just Christians.
Yes. Okay, good question. And Abuna, please forgive me if I say anything wrong. The question is, why do I have to come to church if I'm a Christian? So if I say anything wrong, please correct me. Why do you have to come to church? Really, the simple answer is, what is church? If it's just this building, you have a beautiful church, by the way. I was taking pictures earlier. So may God fill it more and bless Abuna's service and all. But if it's just the building, then you don't need to come to church. But what is, theologically speaking, what is the church? And if you're a Christian, what is Christianity? And what is the church? What is the church? Yes, sir.
When Jesus says that he will raise this church and over after turning over the moneylenders' tables, he's referring to his body.
Very good. Very good. His mystical body. Yes, thank you. Thank you. His mystical body. I was having a conversation with someone he asked me the same question. And I told him, listen, there's a difference. Our church, as Orthodox Christians, is not an organization. Our church is an organism. And there's a big difference. In other words, living cells. Not just an organization with an administration, with this and that and activities, which is all great. But it's an organism at the core. People together working, edifying one another. And you read, I would encourage you to read the epistle to the Ephesians. Okay? Edifying one another, building one another, so that the body of Christ can be edified. How do you do that without the sacraments and the sacramental life of the church? How can you become in Christ without the channel that Christ gave us to come into us? So life, Christianity, is about Christ. I must be in Him to have the human condition solved. But I, as a creation or as a creature, cannot be in Him unless He comes in me first and takes me into Him as the Creator. How does He come in me? By the Eucharist, baptism, the Eucharist, repentance and confession, the life of sacraments of the church. These are the channels of grace. Comes into me, I go to Him. Can you do that at home? I doubt it. I don't doubt it. I don't believe it. So the church is so essential to the life of a Christian. Saint Cyprian of Carthage said, no one can have God as his father unless he has the church as his mother. And there's countless. There's a book by the Reverend Father Abuna Tedros Ya'ub Malati. The book is called The Church, the House of God. Al-Kanisa, Bayt Allah. It's a rather thick book, but it explains extensively the essence of the church. There's another book also by Father Tedros Ya'ub called Christ in the Church, or the Eucharist, Christ in the Church. And they will again, forgive me if I, okay. I think we should probably conclude, because, no. I think we should conclude, but in closing, I want to tell you final statements and comments, and I am blessed and privileged, and undeservedly, and I only me know that it's not deserving, that I go and speak to several youths and throughout the States and in Canada as well, in the ministry of apologetics and sharing the Christian faith and the truthfulness of the Christian faith, and I get bombarded with very aggressive audience on college campuses and so on and so forth. So I've seen several youths all over the States and Canada and so on and so forth, and I've noticed a few things in this church and the youth of this church. First and foremost, I was praying the liturgy with Sabuna, and I turned, and I have never seen, and this is not an exaggeration, I've never seen a church that has so many blessed members that were praying. I heard when you were all praying, I heard the church was shaking. It gave me goosebumps, and I'm not trying to be drama or anything, but it was a heartfelt feeling, and it's a blessing. And may God bless Abuna Antonius' service and Abuna's hat service, so it is something I don't want you to take for granted. I'm a visitor, and I've seen this, and I appreciate it. I also saw how many of you are brothers and sisters in one family, and I could see the love and friendship between all of you, and I hope that you all build on that. And I've learned so much from you, interacting with you, and your questions and comments over this weekend. I hope this weekend was was worthwhile or not a waste of your time. And one last thing, I want you to please, genuinely, I'm asking you to pray for this ministry and this service of apologetics, because the world needs it, and only through the grace of Christ and through your prayers and Abuna's prayers that this may continue on. So again, thank you for having me this weekend. I thoroughly appreciated it.